Opening question at all of our campuses, by show of hands, who loves snow, right? Snow. Yeah, about 50-50, okay? This is an informal poll. I'm not sure where I'm going to use this information, but it's great to have you. And you know what? Snow every Sunday in January on one of my favorite series that we've ever done. So I want to welcome you, whatever campus you're at, to Cedar Creek. And thanks for working through the snow. Those of you watching online, thanks for tuning in. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Ben. I'm the lead pastor, and I've really enjoyed the series. I've enjoyed hearing from you. And one of the things that's been really fun is knowing that we have a new audience. So at all of our campuses, would you put your hands together to welcome those who are watching at Toledo Correctional right now? Thank you so much for being a part of our service. Woo! Now, we're talking about how to live your best life, which it is interesting in some ways, because some of you feel like you're living a great life. You're happy with the way this year has started, and there are others of you, I know, that you don't feel like you're anywhere close to living your best life. And wherever you're at, I'm really excited to kind of hopefully tie some of these pieces together this weekend. But I am excited about the series we're starting next weekend. We're going to start a series called What Do You Meme? Meaning, what do you mean? We're going to use some memes. If you don't know what those are, we're going to help teach you and bring you along. Those of you that do, it's going to be like, this is going to be fun. Here's one of the goals. February is terrible in Northwest Ohio. Maybe you love February, but it's terrible. And so we want to create an environment where every week when you come, our hope is to get you to laugh more than once, okay? So that's going to be a little bit fun. We also want to talk about some things that are going to add practical value to your life when it comes to understanding what others mean in relationships. What does the Bible mean? And so we're going to be using some memes to help us along the way. But next weekend, in light of the Super Bowl, we've decided to do something we've never done. We're going to have what we're calling a preach-off. A little competition, me and 3 others, 2 teams. You're going to have to find out who's coming up on stage next weekend. It's going to be a combo of whose line is it anyway. So we're going to be given a passage that we haven't seen or prepared for at the service that we have to come out and talk about and try to pull some sort of, yeah, some of you are sweating. I'm sweating, okay? So it'll be fun. You're going to get to see us probably fumble over our words, and there's going to be some bonus words that we get to incorporate into the middle of the talk. If some way, like we got to find a way to fit rhinoceros into the talk, right? So it'll be fun. You know what? Let me not say fun. It'll be fun for you. It'll be an experience for all of us. And so that's going to be starting next weekend. And make sure you join us. Every service, the verses will be different. So I can't even take what I get on Saturday and prepare for Sunday. So it'll be a real live, fun environment. And we'll maybe declare a winner because competition at times can be a little fun. And for those of you who are like, okay, so you're just making it a big preach-off. What value is that going to add to my life? Doesn't sound like fun for me. We'll kind of wrap everything up at the end and talk about how do we navigate some of the Bible passages that are hard to understand what they mean. All right? So that's next week and that's the next series. But today, we're going to kind of land the plane on living my best life. I was thinking about the subject that I want to work on. How do we connect some of the dots? And my wife and I were talking about some of the stories and places that we've been. And have you ever had this mindset when it comes to something that's in front of you? We'll just figure it out as we go. I mean, have you ever done that? I mean, I think we all do in different ways. Before smartphones and before GPS, yes, I remember those days. I know some of you, you've never experienced life this way. Good for you. But it was way more adventurous to walk around a new city that you've never been to just figuring it out. I mean, there are times, some of you remember this, like you were looking for a place to eat, and what did you have to do? You had to look at the sign outside of the restaurant and make a value judgment on whether you were going to go in or not. Or if you were looking for a specific place, you could do laps around the place and miss it because your phone wasn't telling you 3 steps to the right, And so a few years ago, Cedar Creek helped launch a church in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. A few people from Bowling Green, a campus ministry there, transplanted themselves in Amsterdam, a community that really doesn't have a whole lot of Jesus-following churches. There are a couple of churches, but it would be like a post-Christian or post-church community. And so they were in search of potentially some support, ways we could encourage them. And some of our team members were like, hey, we're going to go over. Anyone interested in going on the trip? And my wife and I were like, hey, we don't have any kids. We got lots of free time. So hands went up in the air. Sounds like fun, right? That sounds like fun for some of you. So this was a long time ago. We get to Amsterdam, the Netherlands. They speak Dutch. A few of them speak English. They're not always pumped to see Americans walking around the city. It's kind of like we're big, loud, obnoxious rhinos. See what I did there? I incorporated that random word. Yeah, you saw that. That's right. And so anyway, the first night that we're there, we're trying to find a place to eat. And what do we say? We'll just figure it out. And so we did. We started exploring the city, and it was exciting, and the row housing, and the kind of the bikes, and all of this stuff. You're just kind of taking it all in, pointing and doing what loud Americans do when they travel overseas. Oh, wow, look at all that stuff, whatever. And then like somebody's smelling or selling recreational drugs on the street, and you're like, oh my goodness, look at that. It's like crazy. And so as we're trying to walk along, find a place to eat, have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, you're kind of walking along and talking and taking it all in, and then all of a sudden you're thinking it, but you're not really thinking very clearly because you're talking and taking it all in, and it dawns on you like, I'm not really sure where I'm at. And like in a nanosecond, it's like a million different dots connect, and you look around and you're like, I don't think we're supposed to be here. I don't think red light district was on the menu, And so it's like, oh, okay, how did we get here? Well, when you're not sure where you're going, you'll find yourself in strange places. I mean, that's true. And it's one thing when you're trying to find a place to eat, wandering around Amsterdam. It's another thing when you're trying to live your life that way. Because when you're not sure where you're going, you're going to find yourself in some strange places. Some of you are there right now. Because when it comes to your marriage, it's like, we'll just figure it out as we go. Or when it comes to parenting, we'll just kind of figure it out as we go. When it comes to your life, the way that you're living your life, we'll just kind of figure it out where we go. The one place where we end up spending a little more strategic time is our job, which is interesting. One of the places where we spend the least amount of time thinking about this? Oftentimes it's our faith. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Because when you don't know where you're going, you'll find yourself in strange places. That's why vision is so important. It brings focus, that brings clarity on the best next step for you and for me. We need vision in our life. We all want clarity in our life. We want to know what we're supposed to do next. And I think under the surface, we have this desire to live our best life, but where we get stuck is where our focus is. And sometimes we get focused on our regrets. We get focused on our wants. We get focused on what other people are doing, comparing our life. That's why this grid has been really helpful for me and hopefully for you, because we're supposed to be focused on what we were made to do. The tension is most of our life lives in these two worlds. There's things that I have to do, and that comes at the expense of all the things that I want to do. And it's like we play this tennis match in our life all week long, and it's exhausting, which means we drift to the mindless space in our life. And so as we started this series a few weeks ago, we talked about, we need to focus on what you're made to do. And as you do that, do you know what we begin to identify? You begin to identify some areas in your life where it's like there's a wall, there's a barrier, there's an obstacle that's keeping you from what you're made to do. And so our temptation, my temptation and yours, is to point the finger out there at culture and the news and the politics and all you and family member and in-laws and, if you just, but a couple weeks ago, if we're going to live our best life, we need to remember that it's repair in me that makes life better for me. Yes, there are obstacles out there, but if you're going to live your best life, you can't be waiting for everybody else to get there together. It's like we got to repair in us. We got to pay attention to the log, as Jesus taught us, in our own life. And when we do that, that's what helps us live our best life, and that's better for other people too. But when you and I start to identify an area in our life that needs repair, do you know what my temptation is? I talked about this last week. It's to do it alone. It's to try to figure it out and solve it. I don't really want to talk about it because it's a little embarrassing. It's like, I want to show that I have what it takes. But if we're going to live our best life, we need to remember that my life and your life is better when we journey together. When we have a group of people, we're not trying to do it alone. And we're not just hanging out. We're actually going somewhere together. So if we're going to live our best life, we need to pay attention to where our focus is and what we're made to do. We need to remember, repair in me makes life better for me and you, and that my life is better when we journey together. And so today I want to connect all of the dots by talking about vision and the role that vision plays in helping us with these things. And so if you're taking notes, here's the bottom line for this week. Vision allows my future potential to guide my present dilemma. Vision, the ability to see. Vision allows my future potential. In other words, when I see my future potential, when I have clarity, when I can focus on that, vision allows my future potential, capacity, what is possible, to help guide my next step, to help me guide me in my present dilemma, however big or small that is. Because sometimes the present dilemma is a big deal. It seems like a mountain that's immovable. Other times, the present dilemma is, how should I respond to this email that I got from, down the hall? When we allow our vision to guide us in our present dilemma, our vision of what our future potential is, when we invite that person into the conversation, man, it changes the way that you live. One of my team members, Eric, was sharing with me that a documentary involving Shaquille O'Neal recently just came out, and he was sharing what practice was like with Phil Jackson, legendary coach. And he said, well, surprisingly, for some people, it's surprising for them to hear we spent more time visualizing the championship. He would have us imagine what it is to be the series MVP. He would have us visualize our future potential because he believed that helped drive us in our present dilemma. So Shaq would sit there and imagine himself he spent more time imagining himself holding the MVP than he did practicing free throws. And I think, well, you probably could have used a little more practice with free throws, bro. You were pretty terrible. It's like, sometimes that's how we look at stuff like this. But the truth is, if you've ever talked to someone who's gone through Dave Ramsey's program, Financial Peace University, to go debt-free, do you know what he does? He helps paint a vision of their future potential to help guide them in their present spending today. That's how vision is so powerful. Vision is important if you own a business or if you have a business that's trying to make a difference. Vision for us is critical. We want to look at the future potential of what our community could be if they knew God and knew how to find freedom. Imagine if everybody discovered their purpose, the difference that would make in your family, in your school, in your neighborhood, in your workplace. It would change our cities. Vision is so powerful. In fact, recently I was listening to a podcast featuring one of my favorite authors. He's written 2 New York Times best-selling books. His name is Bob Goff. Here's what he says. He says, know who you are becoming and invite that person to weigh in on your life today. Who is it that you want to become in the future? Who do you want to be known as? Stephen Covey talked about beginning with the end in mind. It's like, what do you want people to say about you? And if you don't know what it is that you want them to say, what do you not want them to say? What's on the I don't want that in my life list, in my future list? And let's invite that person into your life. Here's a practical way that he describes it. He says, take your age, whatever age you're at, and add 10 years to that. Now, I know some of you, you're doing like heart palpitations. It's like, because for me, like in my heart, I feel like I'm 25. Who's with me? It's like I'm still 25. Yeah, okay. There's a few gray hairs out there too, which makes me inspired. Yes, it's like once 25, always 25. But when I add 10 years, I'm going to be 39 next month. That makes me 49. Now, I know some of you are beyond that. You're like, poor baby. But still, when I first thought about that, I'm 10 years away from 50. Oh, how do I feel about that? It's like, it starts, what does it do? It puts things into perspective. And so when I ask the question, what do I want my life to be like at 50? How do I want people to describe me? How do I want my kids to describe me? How do I want my finances to look at 50? Let's let 50-year-old Ben weigh in on the decisions that I'm making today. Because you know what we typically say? We'll just figure it out. We typically say, we'll get to that someday. And we end up missing our best life. Vision is helpful when it comes to business and finances and, the way that we physically look, but vision is essential for us spiritually. That's why I love our theme verse for the series. The pastor's trying to give a spiritual vision. He says that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. You have new potential when you surrender your life to Jesus. You have new potential that you don't have on your own. This means that the old life is gone. Doesn't feel like it's gone. A new life has, now this is important, it doesn't say has finished. That's the gap that you're experiencing. It's that a new life has begun. This means that in any present dilemma, in any situation that we face, for those of us who follow Jesus, there's a new life perspective, and then there's an old life, an old Ben perspective. There's a new life that God is trying to make you into, that you're made to live. And then there's an old version where you bring some of your past, your baggage, old patterns of behavior into your present dilemma. And so faith is the spiritual vision that allows my future potential with God to guide my present dilemma today. Faith isn't looking at old Ben, old life, and going, hey, how would old Ben navigate this? This is old Ben. No, faith is going, God, where are you trying to make me? Where are you trying to take me in my life? And allowing that to guide how I make choices in that present dilemma, whatever they may be. If you put it on the grid, I would put faith in the made to category. It's what we were made to do. It's the only way we're going to be able to visualize who God made us to be. We have to see the future potential with Him, the new person that He's making us into. The tension is, old Ben, our old life sometimes shows up. And what does that look like? Well, sometimes it looks like failures. Sometimes it looks like feelings, and sometimes it looks like fear. When we let our past failures, our past hurt, regret, guilt, shame show up to guide us in our present dilemma, does it help? It's a terrible guide. And yet oftentimes when we're making decisions in our life, we allow the voice of failure from our past, trying to overcome failure, to lead us to a bunch of have-tos because we regret. Failure is a terrible guide. You know, sometimes for me, it's like our feelings become our guide. And so when we get to a present dilemma, what we do what our feelings tell us to do. Feelings are a terrible guide. Sometimes my feelings lead me to think things in my head that would put me in prison. You know, it's like, you can't do that, right? Because our feelings, man, I'm not saying that they're bad, but they rarely tell us the truth. So, man, we can't let our feelings be our guide. And, you know, I know for me, sometimes just afraid. Fear makes a terrible guide. Fear does not help you live your best life. Fear causes you to drift into the safety zone. No, it's faith that we need. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to teach us when He says, have faith in God. A lot of the messages that He gave were about trusting God. He's like, instead of trying to figure it all out, instead of trying to deal with your failure, instead of trying to overcome your fear on your own, instead of trying to live by your feelings and what feels right in the moment, trust God. Have faith in God. Trust that He can do something in you that you can't do on your own. In fact, to help paint a picture of how important faith is, He says, I tell you the truth, when you have faith in God, you can say to this mountain, may you be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and it will happen. Faith is powerful. It can move the immovable in your life and in mine. It can do what you can't do on your own. And if I'm one of the disciples, when I read this passage, in fact, if you've been following along on the Living It Out, whether it's being emailed to you or you're following on the app, we're reading through the whole New Testament this year, you read this passage this week. When we read stuff like this, I don't know about you, but I'm like, man, I want to experience that kind of faith in my life. And so Jesus, He goes on in this passage, He says, so you must really believe it. You must really believe it will happen and have no doubt in your heart. That's what we need to do. That's what faith looks like. And this is where the tension shows up, doesn't it? Because, I mean, let's be honest. We've all had a dilemma, however big or small. We've all had a mountain show up in our life, and we're like, okay, God, this mountain ain't helping me live my best life. Sometimes the mountain is so painful. It's so challenging. It's so unfair it feels so immovable. And so you know what? We say, oh, God, I believe that you can do anything. I believe that you can move mountains. God, I'm going to really believe, and I'm not going to doubt. I'm going to trust. Please move this mountain, and it doesn't move. And now we're in trouble. Now we start to question our faith, our spiritual vision. And all of a sudden, failure and fear and feelings start to creep up because we come to one of two conclusions. Number one, it's that I didn't do it right. I didn't have enough faith. I didn't faith right. I had doubt somewhere. I didn't pray right. I didn't go to church enough. I didn't do enough. Either I'm the problem or God's the problem. God's too busy. God doesn't really care about me. God's distracted. Is God even there? And I think when we get to that point, I think we kind of miss the point of what Jesus is trying to teach. In fact, there's another passage where this same kind of conversation comes up that I want to look at. The disciples, after hearing Jesus talk about this, the 12 apostles at this point said to the Lord is referring to Jesus, show us how to increase our faith. Reasonable request. I mean, if faith can move mountains, Jesus, how do I increase it? Because the implication here is, apparently I have a doubt issue. I'm missing something. And here's what Jesus says. The Lord Jesus answered, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed. Have you ever seen a mustard seed? I know it's not a regular part of our diet, but if you've ever had a sesame seed bun, it's about the size of a sesame seed, probably a little smaller than that, a little larger than a poppy seed. If you had one of those really fancy, sandwich things with poppy seeds on them, it's like a speck. It's like Jesus is saying here, hey, before you worry about increasing your faith, why don't you just try to have a little? I mean, I don't know if he's being sarcastic here, but he's using the visual of a small mustard seed to say, hey, don't make it about how much faith. It's not about the amount of faith, because if you have faith as small as a speck, look at what it'll do. So you could say to this mulberry tree, may you be uprooted and planted into the sea, and it would obey you. So if you have a little bit of faith, faith is powerful. A mulberry tree for them, it's deeply rooted. You feel like you pull it out and it grows back. It's similar to some of the black mulberry trees that you have growing up like weeds, and at least I have growing in some of the flower beds in my house. It's like you pull them out and it comes back. And so for them, it's not the mulberry tree that's important. It's something that seems immovable. It'll never change. Faith as small as a mustard seed can do that. And they would all be like, yeah. I've heard you say this before. And what's interesting about this account is where Jesus goes next. He says, when a servant comes in from plowing or taking care of sheep, does his master say, hey, come on in, have a seat and eat with me? No. He says, prepare my meal, put on your apron, serve me while I eat, then you can eat later. And does the master thank the servant for doing what he was told to do? Of course not. In the same way, when you obey me, you should say, we are unworthy servants who have simply done our duty. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I'm like, either Jesus is having a bad day or he's hangry, okay? It's like, what happened? I thought we were talking about how did we end up here? And I think some of the challenge for us is the culture in which we've grown up. Because as Americans, we feel like we are entitled to certain things. We feel like you should never treat anybody like that. Now, let me be clear. Jesus is not condoning some sort of rude, unappreciative behavior. He's using what would have been common for them to experience. A slave would never walk in with an external, entitled attitude. They may have it under the surface, but a servant would understand who the master really is. And so I think faith, what Jesus is trying to illustrate, is knowing who the master really is. And sometimes we use faith from an entitlement perspective and miss the faith that moves mountains. Because sometimes when we look at our faith, we focus on the amount of faith that we have. So it's like, how do I get more faith? How do I increase my faith? How do I need to pray more? What do I need to do? In other words, in order to get God to do stuff for me. The problem with when we start to focus on the amount of our faith, do you know what that means? That means we're me-focused. We're focused on what I need to do in order to get God to obey me. If I pray more, if I do more, if I go to church more, if I read my Bible more, then God will what? Owe me. I'm a hard-working servant. He should at least give me a thank you, right? That's not faith. That's not trusting God. That's not spiritual vision on what God can do in you. That's what can I do to get God to pay attention to me. Other times, faith isn't amount-focused, it's outcome-focused. It's mountain-focused. It's mulberry tree-focused. It's present dilemma-focused. I'm looking at the problem that's in front of me, and I'm thinking to myself, man, God, this is keeping me from living my best life, and I need you to move this mountain. I need you to take it out of my life. And the tension with that is that's not faith either. That's focused on some sort of outcome that you feel like you need. And I was reading a book this past week that had this quote. He says, when your dream, you could insert present dilemma, your problem. When your dream or present dilemma becomes a demand, it takes the center place where only God should be. And so when we're outcome focused, God, I need you to move this mountain, that's not faith either. Do you know what faith is? Faith is really about the object of your faith. It is master-focused. It's paying attention to who the master is and remembering that you're not the master. I think that's some of what Jesus is trying to teach here. Pastor Craig Rochelle, he's a pastor of Life Church, popular church in the U.S. and online. Here's what he says. He's in a series right now where he's saying, start with who before do. When it comes to living our best life, we focus on the do. I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to do less of that. That's going to help me live my best life. But spiritually, and even personally, when you start with who you want to be, the person that God has created, when you start with who you want to become, it'll naturally influence what you do in your life. Start here. Start small here. You know what else means start with the who before do? Start with who the master is before what you need to do. And that's the kind of faith, that's the kind of spiritual vision that begins to move mountains. And so that's why Jesus teaches here. In the next slide, he says, when a servant comes in from plowing or taking care of the sheep, does his master say, hey, come on in and eat with me? The master, when the servant knows who the master is, there's no entitlement here. No. The next slide says, no. He says, the master says, prepare my meal, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat. Then you can eat later. And if we're not careful, we'll insert some sort of harsh tone there that isn't there. Because the reality, for those of us who follow Jesus, someday, in eternity, we will enjoy the wedding feast of the Lamb. We will get to eat with him in eternity someday. And so when we walk through this life here on earth, it's not like, hey, feed me, God, do what I need you to do. No. If he's the master, and if we know we're going to be able to eat someday, then that means our time here on earth has a purpose. We have a mission that the master has set before us. It means that we're going to have to prepare the meal, put on an apron, and serve. It means there's some things in our life that are going to need prepped. We're going to need to, think about this, know our master, know God in ways that we are preparing ourselves and the life around us for what? To put on something. What does put on mean? It means to put on an apron, put on a purpose, to understand how you're wired. It may involve finding freedom from some of the things that you've been holding on to. Why? So that when we're prepared and when we put on, we can serve our master, so that we can make a difference. That's what faith looks like. And when we have that kind of faith on what the master is trying to do in us and through us, it changes the way that we look at our life. And to help us with this, sometimes a visual aid is helpful. Do you know what this is? This is not a bunch of rough cut diamonds, okay? So don't get all excited. It's glass. And this glass represents you, and it represents me. Because let's be honest, in our life, there are just parts of our life that are broken. We're not perfect. In fact, if this glass could talk, it could probably tell stories of all the places that it's been. The same way that you could. What is this glass capable of producing in its own life? on its own? I mean, I know, the answer is obvious. Nothing. It's glass. It's there. It has a story to tell. It's broken. You can see it. But if prepared appropriately, it can become this. This is not what you think it is. Okay? Somebody was like, wow, I like this church, right? Yeah, it's like, this is crazy. This is finely ground glass. It's like fine sand. It's purified. It's been prepared. And when glass gets to this place, if it puts on something that gives it a little bit of color, it becomes a bar. And in the hands of a master artist, what used to be broken glass, after it's been prepared, after it's put on some color, in the hands of, let's say, Matt Richardson, who lives right here in Perrysburg, that glass can become this. And something that serves a purpose. Something that's beautiful. That the glass itself could never make on its own. You know, the glass can't will itself there. The glass can't build up enough internal faith. It's not about the amount of faith. It's not about the outcome. It's about trusting. It's about submitting itself into the hands of the master artist. And when that's done, look at the potential. Now, sometimes we can get so focused on our past. We can get so focused on our failures, our feelings, our fears, that we try to let that guide our present dilemma. But when we let our faith, the future potential of what God can do through us, guide us in our present dilemma, we can let go of some of the things that we carry with us each and every day. You know what's interesting? If I were to invite the master artist out, when he sees this, what does he see? Does he see broken glass? Well, yes. Does he see all of the problems and all of the issues and all of its past? Maybe. Do you know what the master artist sees? He sees this. He sees potential. The same way that when God sees you, he sees potential of what he can do in your life. He can take broken glass and move mountains. And yeah, there's going to be a process, and there may be a furnace, and it's going to take time, and it doesn't happen overnight. But when we submit ourselves to him, suddenly God puts us on a journey where we live our best life, and we become a vessel that has a purpose that can serve others. And you know, here's what's interesting. If I were to put that out on my mantle, do people look at that and go, wow, look at the broken glass? No, they look at, wow, look at the hands of the master artist. And so when people look at you, it's not wow, Ben. It's wow, God. And so in the same way, when you obey, when we follow Jesus, when we use faith and have spiritual vision of what future potential God may be able to do through us in our present dilemma, we realize we are unworthy servants. Another word that you could put in there is incapable. Not to make you feel less than, but to acknowledge how great our master is. We are unworthy servants who have simply done our duty. And what's our duty? It's to trust him. It's to trust him with the work that he wants to do in your life. That whatever present dilemma that you're facing, however big or small, God can use that to transform you. And he cares way more about who you are becoming a person of love, of joy, of peace, that isn't shifted by the culture, the pain, the heartache around you. No, you can become that person with him. Why? Because that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. If he can endure the cross and come back from the dead, and he lives in you because you've surrendered your life to him, you can overcome and get through anything that this world has to offer. You're new. And yeah, there may be temptations to have the old life be a guide, but the old life is gone. It no longer defines you. A new life has begun. And so when you're living your best life, vision brings focus, brings clarity on the best next step for you. But that vision is allowing God's future potential in you to guide your present dilemma. So I don't know what mountain you have been facing lately. Would you begin to see that it's not about the mountain moving, it's not about the amount of faith, it's not about you getting it perfect, it's about what you're going to allow and trust God to do in your life? Because for some of you, you've been walking with Christ for years. And maybe some of this faith talk just starts to sound like, oh yeah, I've heard it before. I want you to hear today that God has something new that he wants to do in you this year. I'm not talking big or small, I'm talking new. Are you open to it? I know there are some of you right now, you're facing a mountain that seems immovable, impossible, it's crushing, it's painful. So don't be focused on the amount of your faith. Don't be focused on the outcome of your faith. Be focused on the object of your faith, the one, the master artist who can use whatever is in front of you to move mountains in your heart and in your soul, to be the source of joy and peace and hope that you're looking for. And I know there are some of you, you've never taken your first step of faith and trusting your life to him. I want to give you an opportunity to do that in the seat that you sit right now. And so to help wherever you're at, let's just, each one of us, just take a moment and bow our heads or close our eyes and be reflective on whatever it is that you feel like God is whispering to you. And for those of you that need to take your first step on that spiritual journey, it begins with a prayer, a declaration from your heart to God saying, hey, I want to surrender my life to you. If you need words in the quietness of your heart, say this prayer. God, today I want to surrender my life to you. Today I realize that I can't do it on my own. And so I need your help. I need your spirit to guide me. And so today I trust, I believe, I have faith that Jesus died on the cross for me. That Jesus came back from the dead, giving me hope of a new life with you, and so I want to follow you from this day forward. Thank you for loving me. For those who prayed that prayer, today marks not the finish line, but the starting line of a journey, walking with Jesus, where we know him more and we experience him. We get faith, spiritual vision in our life of the next steps that we need to take. And church is really a movement of people going on that journey together. So I thought it would be helpful for all of us, before we leave and pick up the rest of the agenda of our day, to sit in the truth of this for a moment during the song. In fact, during the song, you're going to hear a lyric. It's not by power, it's not by might, only by the cross, only by what Jesus has done for us do we come alive. And so the prayer of this song that I'm asking for you to make the prayer of your life is that he would make every burning heart holy ground. Holy ground is dirt, it's sand, it's broken glass that becomes sacred space when God's presence shows up. And so that's what we want our lives to be. That's what faith is all about. And so let's make this song our prayer as we start or continue to move into 2019 together.